who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy, and I think it's particularly apposite tonight because we're talking about the Grenfell support group. Thank you. I don't believe there are any apologies for absence. Are there any declaration of controversy? No. And the minutes of the leadership team meeting held on the 10th of December. Be happy that I signed as a true and accurate record. Thank you. Before we start the meeting formally, I'd just like to say this is Dan's last meeting. So even though you don't have a paper, I'd just like to put on record our thanks to you for 5 years. You've been executive director and really all you've achieved in the last 5 years. And thank you very much, even though you don't have a paper tonight, usually you do, for all your advice, all your cheerful advice actually, all your acumen, and really everything else you've contributed towards the council. So thank you very much indeed. And we wish you well.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
The cyber attack, let's start with that. It's a key discussion report. As we all know, last November we were the victim of a cyber attack. And as Maxine said to council recently last week, the recovery is continual, it's coordinated action across multiple work streams, and it's going to happen over an extended period. And I'd like to really thank the teams again because they worked so hard across the Christmas period. And now I think it's true to say that we've started slowly and safely turning things back on. And yesterday that was the internet, that was connecting officers and councillors back to the internet, being able to use their computers again, which is really quite a big step. And actually, you think when people don't have access to computers, how absolutely impossible it is for them to do their work. We're actively testing new solutions to our housing benefits, trying to process our planning application, land searches. There's a lot of things that we still have to do, but we are making progress. And I believe it's true to say that everything is going as planned, but we are not there yet. And there are many bumps in the road ahead. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for Callum and for Mike. On this paper is really an update on the situation as it is. And it also proposes delegating decision-making powers to the chief executive, to Maxine, in conjunction with Jem and me, that we would then make the relevant decisions. So, Maxine, for a start, I suppose I'd quite like to ask you, what's the plan for the next few months? And also, I know there was a goal meeting today, so emergency contingency procedures, how long is that going on for? Yeah. When do we start shifting into recovery mode, where this all comes back to your decision and planning with Gemini?
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely. So the cyber attack was on the 24th of November. I think we very rapidly learned to follow the kind of standard practice in the event of a large cyber attack, be that public or private sector. And we've been working with NCC, who are cyber specialists, and central government and London Resilience and the other two boroughs in setting out those stages. So we made a really positive progress just before Christmas in receiving our first letter of attestation, which means that's where other companies and bodies that we work with are happy to reconnect to us, because we've been able to confirm at the first level that the impact is contained into our system. Just something else I think it's worth just mentioning is that the reason why we have been significantly disabled in the delivery of our services is because you have to take everything offline.
Yeah.
So it's not because everything is broken as a result of the cyber attack, it's that we have to take everything offline, check for anywhere that cyber attackers might have been, and then very carefully and slowly, according to all of the certification that we need to get, build that back up again. So the focus under the civil contingency arrangement has been on three things, and those three things will be continuing. One is the cyber recovery itself, the rebuilding of the digital systems, the containment and recovery. The other is the impacts on services as set out in the paper here. And then finally, the management of the data breach. Unfortunately, data was copied by the cyber attackers. We did not have data encrypted, which has been really is really good in that it means that we have access to all of our data. But unfortunately, the cyber attackers do have some copies of it as well. There is an ongoing police investigation, and so there are some elements which are obviously remain confidential to that investigation. So the contingency arrangements under the GOLD have been, so firstly, they were meeting twice a day. We're now currently meeting every day, but some of that is going into planning. We've just set some sort of tests really to take handover from civil contingencies from the GOLD arrangements into just more normal cyber recovery. And part of what's critical to that is the assessment that we received from MCC, our consultants, that we have reached the right level of hygiene to be able to do that. So we expect to get that within the next 2 weeks. But we're not sitting around waiting for that. We're setting up the cyber recovery planning in parallel, and that's referred to in the timetable in the report at 6.7. Callum and Mike have joined us because Mike is responsible for digital services as the exec director, and Callum has agreed, and thank you, Callum, to take on the responsibility for the cyber recovery overall, because we want to make sure we align it with the council's priorities and transformation objectives on digital.
Okay, so when does that mean that we come out of GOLD?
Within the next 2 weeks.
Within the next 2
I can't
weeks,
say
sorry.
exactly which
No,
day.
but within January.
Yeah. But GOLD is, it's not a kind of secret
No,
box.
that's
It's
I'm
really
just
important
interested
that
in-
we brief, that it's very open in any decisions it makes, and that we that everybody's fully briefed.
But just from our point of view, with the Civil Contingencies Act, that you think that in a couple of weeks we'll be able to come through that. The other thing I'd just like to say is, looking at that table, wow, Jan to summer 2026, we're going to shut safely. And that's 6 months, right?
Yeah, and the
So we're not
disruption.
going to be through it till at least 6 months.
So we can talk a bit more about that. It might be a good idea to bring Callum in, but we're basing this on the experience of other organisations. We would, in terms of what residents experience, we would be much more confident and hopeful that that they will experience full functionality sooner than that. But we will have backlogs that we have to deal with. We will have new systems that we are developing because we've decided to ditch old ones, and it's all of that work that takes that longer time frame.
Thank you. Questions? Sorry.
Okay, so thank you first of all for all the work that officers have done, because it's been and it will be for a long time, a huge thing and problem for the council, and a lot of work going into trying to get us back up and running. My first question is about a topic that colleagues will know is close to my heart, which is elections and postal vote processing capacity, which is at 5.6. As you can imagine, it's pretty concerning to read that we're not certain about postal vote processing capacity, and indeed that the electoral services missed a deadline in December. So what reassurance can you give that votes will be processed, that we can run free, fair elections, etc. in May? And then the second part of my question, which is to move over to my portfolio. Obviously, the conveyancing searches are frozen, and likewise backlogs in terms of planning and licensing committees. Again, what comfort can you give? Because I know how important these services are for people. In the case of land searches, people's lives are on hold if they can't get these transactions through. That's really serious. And likewise with committees, it's something, the highest volume of things that go to our website for is planning. So if you can't hold a planning committee, that's affecting a large number of people in the borough. So those are a few areas I'm particularly keen to hear about.
Thank you, Councillor. On the electoral services, well, both of those systems that you've highlighted are two of our three priority systems that we're focusing on in all of our GOB meetings, and making sure that we're putting all of our possible resource we can into getting those systems restored and functioning. On the electoral services process, we are testing as we speak, and that's a positive position. So we've made quite a lot of progress in terms of feeling confident that that system will be restored to good functionality, imminently. Which is very positive. On the planning systems, we use, as you know, a slightly outdated general system, and which makes some of our processes of getting that system back up online slightly harder, because we need to ensure that the system itself is operating safely, and we need to then make sure that it's functional. So the system is now operational, but it's not quite as of yet functional. So we've got access back to it. But what we're now doing is testing to make sure that it's going to work in the way that teams need it to be able to work, so that they can run their services as they currently speak. So we've got a testing plan that we're receiving through the gold structures this week. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't give you the same level of assurance as I can on the electoral services, but I can say that we are making progress, and the team know how quite important it is to our results.
Ella.
So I was talking to one of my lovely residents yesterday, and she said to me, "My mum doesn't know what to do about her council tax because she can't pay it at the moment." And so there's sort of wider questions. The immediate question is, what are we recommending to residents to do for a direct debit like that? And actually, depending on how optimistic you are about really getting things back online, should we be? If there is writing to residents suggesting they make some kind of interim, I don't know. I'm conscious that our finances are in a fairly polar state, and hounding people for money afterwards will be quite painful all round. So the more we can get the money coming in, the better for everyone. So I don't know.
I mean, that is the other of the key systems that we're focusing on, Civica, which is for benefits and for business rates and council tax, in a similar position to Accolade, in the sense that we're just commencing user testing on that, and there's that will take the estimate is 3 weeks for that, and then we'll be able to write to all residents about their those who pay by direct debit, and all businesses about their direct debit. So we're really waiting for that. We haven't got access to the data at the moment, so we can't write to them and give them any advice, really, because we need the system to do that.
We have all the data, that's the point. That's what Maxine said. We have all the data.
Yeah, we have the data, but we haven't got access to the system to use it. We're testing the system to check it works.
So we don't have the data. Either we do have the names and addresses,
okay,
or we don't
have the data, but we can't use the data at the moment, so we can't drive to all residents.
Do you know who they are?
Yes, they
We
do.
know
We
they are.
can't approach them because we can't use the system to do that.
We can't use the system, yeah.
So it's exactly what Callum was saying. It's operational, but it's not functional.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is going through it to say,
Um,
are there any glitches here, etc.
I have told my lovely resident that I would recommend that they put the money aside.
Yes.
You haven't actually answered my question about what you should tell her and her family and what your plan is for recovery.
The plan for recovery is to run the direct debits when the system's back up. We have to give people notice of that. We have to write to them under the direct debit guarantee. We have to give them notice that we intend to do that. And you're right, it will be more difficult to recover that money because of the delays while the system's been down. So there is clearly a problem for us in recovering it, and equally there is a problem for residents if they've spent that money on something else. So if they put it aside, that will be obviously ideal. We're not advising people. Some people are making payments themselves, I think, but we're not advising people to do that because that will create more disruption within the system because people will have made payments and then we'll have to stop making a direct debit payment to them. So that will cause additional problems for us and potentially for them. So it's better if they don't do that. But some people will have done that, and we will have to be. When we're talking about the backlog, we will have to go through and identify if payments have been made.
And I think what we know from recovery efforts generally, whether that be on Grenfell or any other services and systems that we have seen other councils go through, is you can't do too much comms. So we have written to every household with clear FAQs about what we want people to do in this position, which is about trying to put the money aside, remember that the council will be coming to ask for that funding at the point that we are able to. But equally, we know that residents live busy lives, and we know that we need to keep reminding people of those messages. So as we understand a bit more from business about quite how long that testing process will take, I think it's definitely one of our priority actions for this month to reiterate some of that messaging to make sure people know.
I think that would be, as you say, you can't tell people too many. I mean, they live in social housing, so it obviously didn't. The message didn't reach them. So,
And I mean, it is very difficult. And as we said before Christmas, when those messages went out, particularly difficult over the Christmas period because you're not having to pay. So you think, oh, well, other things that you might want to spend money on. We did say right at the beginning, you recognised that was an issue. That's right. And we'll have to try it again. Who else? Yeah, you are.
So, quick two questions. So, first of all, in terms of the backlog of payment, you're just going to take a big lump. You're going to give terms to people, so assuming that some people might not put the money away. Is it just going to be sort of like 3-4 months rent, bang?
In terms of council tax, we're going to. The aim at the moment is that rather than the payments being made in because they're over 10 months, the aim is that instead of them being made in December and January, that they be made in February and March. So it will be the same amount but delayed by 2 months, and the same for business rates. And I think on rents we'll have to make similar arrangements for it to be over instalments, not to just take it all in one big policy.
And then my second question, really, which is, I suppose, the eternal optimistic, is that, what's going to be our learning from this? Is there anything going to be positive to come out of this experience?
So that can't do most of that, but I think Civica is an example of a system where, as is Accolade, where we've got very old systems, and that's why there's a lot of work to get them back up. So we're going to have to move to a new model for providing those systems. Now that we don't want to prejudge what that will be, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a new Civica system. There are a number of different options assigned in the system or another provider. There's many different options, and that's what the recovery process is about. But whichever of those options we go to, we will end up with better systems than we have. Those systems that were more modern had been modernised, such as Oracle, where we obviously implemented quite recently have not been as impacted by this. I mean, they are impacted because they're connected to other systems, but Oracle itself hasn't been as impacted. And so, as well as the internet coming back up this week, we have Oracle back up and running. It's not running fully yet, but it is back up and running, and we're moving quicker towards that being fully restored.
So if we go back to your timetable, you said April 26th to summer 27th, implementation of new technical infrastructure improvements. That's the foundations for the new systems that you want, but it's not the new systems coming in.
No, that could be both. So
okay, so you're going to do it in parallel. So
yeah.
By the summer, you might have chosen new systems.
Yeah, so there's two things that we need to work through that, and it is an opportunity. So on the one point, it is this the basic system functionality, and does it do what we need it to do? Most importantly, does it do what our residents need it to do? And there'll be opportunity for modernisation through that process. More generally, we know that residents, and indeed you all and councillors generally, have raised questions about our ability to manage demand more through purely digital service, our understanding of data, our understanding of our residents as much as well as we could want to. All of that functionality requires the foundations of all of our systems to be built in a way where we can understand and grip and process information in that way. So what we're hoping to get to in spring is a sort of clear roadmap of what opportunities we have to be able to articulate and then deliver what that infrastructure might look like to enable us to meet some of our broader financial challenges and to be able to deliver a better customer experience to residents who might want to minimise how often they have to contact us and more than they currently do.
And the cost of all that?
So absolutely, we need to be super clear in our current reality that we need to be able to evidence the benefits, the cost, and thinking it through overall. There will be costs involved in this arrangement. I think we need to make sure that we're not only building back the improvements that we've talked about, but we can't lose sight of making sure that our systems are safer and are as safe as they possibly can be for our residents' benefit. So it would be very difficult to give a figure overall right now, but the figures, I think if we wanted to be able to get to becoming the best council possible, delivering the slickest digital services, the costs aren't small.
But those costs would have had to have been incurred anyway, a lot of those costs over a longer time period. Probably, and just as the cost for Oracle were incurred to get to these modern systems, requires investment. But it is also important to say there are other ways. In each area there are different ways to do this. With partners or doing it ourselves.
And it's why it has to link to our broader financial transformation requirements that we want to push through, because what we want to be able to achieve as and wherever as possible is to justify that expenditure by what broader benefits it has for resident delivery and for the cost of that delivery generally. So it might be one-off expenditure that should be facilitative of future savings.
How much did Oracle cost?
I think 10 million. I mean, that is a very expensive. Very expensive.
So I'm just thinking how things are.
But we've talked about.
So the analogy is
Very
it's a house which has almost been broken into. First of all, you have to sort of lock all the windows, get new security in, new safes, new locks, etc. Then you have to figure out if some damage has been done, whether you have to put new wiring, new everything else in. And as you're doing that, you may as well do everything at the same time.
Yeah.
But the cost is
big.
So it's a really quick answer, basically on the same thing, which was obviously what we're agreeing is A and B, 2.0 and B, which is, so I just wondered how, I mean, presumably you've already started looking at the procurement and the additional resources. Because otherwise, we're on quite a tight timescale to be ready for January. So I just wondered if you could bring back to us a sort of maybe a timetable of, when you think procurement will start. Because actually, we know that can take a long time. So you've already got companies in mind, have you, that you're already speaking to, or how far have you got with those processes?
So this is intended to cover the kind of immediate impact, this working at pace for the cyber recovery. And so for those aspects, then yes, we have either got contracts in place that we've had to let already under the gold arrangements, but we have done work, we've met suppliers, we've lined up some suppliers to work with us on the cyber recovery, both the digital elements and the kind of planning for the future. But those contracts are only going to be for 3 months. Because overall we need it to align with our longer term vision. We were already looking at suppliers to work with. We also will need to appoint, it's likely we'll need to appoint someone to work with us on the data breach. So, but we will keep a register of all of those awards and the costs. The consultation, they will be done, as it says in the report, following consultation with Jen and Elizabeth, by section 151. So the intention is to make sure that all of that is done in a way that aligns with the council's overall priorities.
Any other questions? Mary?
No, nothing else. We circulated the paper, but so we didn't actually discuss it in committee. So nothing for me.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a good update, and I guess we'll have other updates to the leadership team over the next months or
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, can we look at the next key decision, which is coming to
Just need to be.
Oh, goodness me, sorry. No, it's speeding on without saying, could we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2?
Really
Perfect.
great.
Thank you very much. Now to the next report, which is sorry, exactly. It's about budget setting and medium-term financial planning. Before I hand over to Jan, I would just like to say, well, a big thank you to him and also to the officers and the whole finance team. So I know you have been working unbelievably hard just to get us this far, because the settlement was only came in just before Christmas, and there's been a lot of changes, hasn't there, to what we had anticipated. And also I'd like to say thank you to my colleagues around the table who have made some very hard and difficult choices. And when we started off the budget process, I think it's fair to say it was pretty daunting, because we were looking at the biggest gap that we've ever seen in Kensington Chelsea. And now I was going to say we're only £900,000 from closing the gap, but that is a testament to the enormous amount of work that you've put in. We've committed about £22 million of savings, and that really is a lot of savings, including, substantial staff savings, whether it's sort of the voluntary redundancy, removing the staff travel card, making better use of buildings. And as much as possible, I think it's fair to say we really have tried to insulate residents from the cuts, from the full impact of the savings that have been required. But let me be absolutely frank, this is not something of our own making. The government care funding review is not only unfair, it's disproportionate, but frankly, it's completely absurd and ridiculous. And it's proving that government and our 2 MPs have little regard for local government or for local people. And actually, I think it not only is a reflection on what they think about what fair funding is, which is removing funding from councils which have been well run to give elsewhere, but also it's a reflection on what we think of what local government is altogether, because basically they're going to be giving us very little choices coming from them. They're saying that they'll cut funding unless we put up tax or reduce services, which is hardly a great paean to local democracy. So over to you, Jen, to talk about some of the really tough choices that we are being forced to make.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I think you've really said it nearly all there. I'm absolutely dismayed that a Labour government has come in on the promise of change, and all they've done is come with punishment. So it is just astonishing that you have Hackney Council celebrating the fact that they're being rewarded because the residents of Kensington and Chelsea now have to give them more money. It's completely perverse. What the government haven't really highlighted is where this money is coming from. So we as an authority collect council tax, we collect business rates, we collect all manner of things. They're essentially now telling the businesses of Kensington and Chelsea that you will pay business rates, but not a penny of that money will stay in the borough. They've also announced, separate to this, that if you live in a house above a certain value, you will pay a mansion tax, and none of that money will stay in the borough either. So, as my frustrations with the national government are plain to see, we have to be the grown-ups and actually figure out how to get through this. And I do commend the team and everybody, all colleagues actually, because they didn't give us much time to work this through. We are putting a plan in place, and we will continue to put pragmatic and sensible plans forward. We have to be really honest with our residents that it is going to hurt, and it's going to hurt everybody, whether you're at the top or whether you're at the bottom. There is simply no getting around the fact that £108 million is being cut from our budget. And if you look at the chart that's ahead of us, if you took the 108, gave it back to us, we would actually have 5 million of surplus. So this is a well-run council that had put plans in place to deal with inflation, legacy of COVID, legacy of cost of living, legacy of the Ukraine war. And here they come again with just another attack on local government. And I think really the message should go out that they're not just attacking Kensington and Chelsea because we're Conservatives, although I think there's a part to play there. They're attacking their own councils in Westminster, Wandsworth, and others, which are of the same colour. So for any Labour councillor planning to stand in May, perhaps you might want to have a think again as to whether your party actually backs you or whether it doesn't. That might be it.
So, questions? Johnny?
Yeah, thank you, first of all. And of course, I agree about Joe Powell's and Ben Coleman's £108 million funding cuts to local government in KNC. It's clearly a huge problem for us. I'm encouraged that despite that, we're able to, like you say, insulate residents from some of the worst of that. So things like our twice-weekly main collection, we're still going to be the only place in London that does it. We'll still be able to collect things like our borough parking permit, investment in schools and parks. And we still have the best maintained roads in London with the fewest potholes. So some really good things, as well as new investments. So the budget that we're planning to bring forward includes things like more street sweepers, more jet washing, more electric buggies. So lots of the things that we know residents really care about, which is fantastic. My question though was that despite everything we've heard, there's a gap of nearly £900,000. So can you give us any insight into how we're looking to close that outstanding sum? Obviously, we've already cut in lots of ways that you wouldn't have wanted to. What might we have to do in order to close the sum that's left?
So we're discussing what those options are over the next couple of weeks before the full budget papers come out. I think there are options to look for some more, a small number of more savings in year to achieve that. There has been, since this paper came out, there is some reduction in that figure actually because of the concessionary fares figure is lower than it was expected when this paper was out. So there's a small glimmer of good news there as well. Will reduce
so you're confident you'll close the gap. So
yes, yeah.
when we come to council next month, we will have a balanced budget without having to use reserves.
We will.
Unlike some of our neighbours.
Yes, I mean there are still councils who have got very large gaps still to close at this stage for 26, 27. And a lot of what's been talked about today, I think it has been a huge effort to get that gap to under £1 million and then to zero by the time we set the budget. And unfortunately, because of the settlement, that effort is going to have to be repeated for the next 3 years at least.
And perhaps you could just tell us about the fourth year. So it's like 20 million a year, roughly, and the fourth year is like 50, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got a cliff edge.
So the way the formula works at the moment is that the total reduction in our funding is taken out as £108 million. but because of transitional relief, because they phase in that reduction, for the first 3 years, the amount lost is 61 billion pounds. We don't know what will happen to the remaining 47 million pounds at the end of that 3-year period. Nobody will tell us. I mean, they won't tell us because they don't know, because they'll say that's another spending review. So we've worked on the assumption, we have to work on the assumption at the moment that that other 47 million pounds of transitional grant will fall out at 29/30. But obviously we have got over that period the opportunity to continue to lobby that the reduction is too high, or to lobby for further transitional relief, so that it doesn't all come out in one go. So both of those things are options, but neither of those things are promised.
Thank you. So,
Thank you. Just echoing everyone's dismay at £108 million. Just once again, kind of punishing councils that have managed to actually keep low tax. I mean, the Socialists are very good at spending other people's money. So, and people of Kensington and Chelsea are going to be supporting other councils that have not managed to their finances as well, which is very disappointing. But we are in this situation now. So, and I'd just like to dig into the situation, as you mentioned, about the 3 years and year 4, because collectively, all the officers and the councillors have managed to achieve £22 million worth of savings this year, which is incredible. The highest amount of discipline there's been since I've been on the leadership team. So, I mean, congratulations to everybody pushing that, and Jen in particular for pushing that. But a big chunk of that was our voluntary redundancy scheme. And as we know, that's not going to happen every year. So how are we going to, even just in the next 2 years, where it's not such a cliff edge as we were in the 4th year, how are we going to achieve some of these? I mean, one of the suggestions from the government is obviously not just to increase our council tax by 5%, but to increase it by a further £150 for everybody, no matter where you live. Plus, so are those the levers that the government is saying we're going to have to do?
So the government's position will be that we have two choices. I think as Jen said, we can either increase that, because they're taking the cap away, that we can either increase our council tax by the assumption that they've made in giving us the grant, which is £150 plus 5%. Indeed, they'll say we can increase it by more than that if we want, or less than that. That's completely our decision. If we don't do that, then we have to make those savings through reducing services or being more efficient. I mean, they will be the only choices available to the council. Other councils in this position, for other reasons, are generally being given the choice of borrowing what they call exceptional financial support, and that's basically borrowing to fund the revenue budget. I don't think we'd want that option, because it's a very poor option anyway, and it just creates a problem for future years. But I can be fairly certain they wouldn't give us that option, because they would say, if you still have a budget gap, we've given you the power to increase council tax, so you will have to use that. So I think they're the only two options we will have, and we will have to go through the budget as we have done this year, and we'll have to identify where we can make savings, and whether there are things we can necessarily stop doing.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Josh?
Thank you, everyone. Question I have. Obviously, what everyone else has said, our members of parliament haven't gone out to bat for us. They certainly have not been public in regards to the impact this is going to have, especially their own voters too, I may add, especially given the cost of the £108 million cut. But given that Elizabeth has done a sterling job going out, doing the media, doing the public affairs, what conversations have we had since we've got the new adjusted figure regarding with MHELG, with Treasury? Have we set, first of all, have we said what the hell? Secondly, this is totally unfair, and it does take away democratic accountability from local people to set their own rates, which they're basically just putting us into a corner. So it's not our decision, it's almost their decision. Have we pushed that across as well separately? And thirdly, what are the next steps in regards to any kind of public communication pushback or private meetings with civil servants or ministers in regards to our position?
So we will say that in our response to the consultation, the settlement is called a provisional settlement every year, and then there's a consultation on it this year. It's been deliberately reduced in time. Most of that is about commenting on the sort of technical aspects of the consultation to check that there's nothing wrong with it. It is important to say that this is very clearly the intention. What is in the settlement is the intention. So we will respond and say we don't agree with it, but I don't think that that's going to lead to any response. What is happening is the intent. This was done. We were told this as officers. We were told this by civil servants on the morning, and they were very clear. We are giving you the lever, which is taking away the referendum cap. You can use that or not use that, but that's it. It's been done with eyes wide open. It hasn't been done. It's not an accidental. It's not an accidental.
It's not like potholes where they get completely wrong.
No,
this is intentional.
This is absolutely intentional, and the minister stood up in the House and said the same. Said the same thing. That their view is
absolutely clear. This is what they intend to do.
Their view is that they want those councils to. They want to see council tax equalisation between those councils that is there.
And they're quite happy to defund Central London in order to achieve that. Emma.
So mine isn't really a question. I guess it's a couple of observations. So I'm dismayed by everyone that I just can't. I'm astonished by the lack of basic economics of this government. Robbing Peter to pay Paul is not a solution. You have to grow the pie. And in all of this, what we haven't heard is how they're going to get the economy is flatlining. That's what all the data tells us. Liam's spot on about inflation coming down, but I've read again today jobless numbers going up. This will not solve the problem. They'll just be back here in another 5 years because they haven't grown the pie. Having said all that, and thank you to office for all huge amounts that they have done. I'm a great believer that we just have to kind of make the most of what we've got. I know for colleagues here that ideologically just taxing our residents silly is not our preferred option. And I mean, council tax is supposed to be for services provided. The idea you're going to cut services and charge people more will be, I think, complete anathema to people. And my view is we need a cultural shift at this household, and we will have to cut our cloth. And we've always had money for stuff, and we're just not going to. And there will be no sacred cows, and that for officers and councillors alike are going to have to get on board with that. Rather than just default the easy position of let's just pile it on the taxpayer. That's just not okay. And so that's my hate please worth on.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. I think we will have to have a cultural change.
Yeah. And
I think next year it's going to be very difficult. And we'll have to start early again, looking at where we can make cuts, etc.
But also income and things like that.
And income generation and etc. Yeah. I think we're very well put, Emma. Sorry, I think it was Sarah. And then
it's not really a question. Jem and I met some of the anchor BCS yesterday, and obviously we're talking to them about cutting investment in BCS, which is going to have such a big impact on probably our most vulnerable residents. And it just
very unpleasant.
It's going to be really unpleasant and really hard on them. It's just not fair.
Kim.
I agree with what Emma says, but I'll turn Emma's observation into a moan and probably a question at the end of it. Because this feels very vindictive to me, because we're looking at the impact of the council and how we're budgeting, but it excludes the private schools emptying and going down in numbers, that excludes the mansion tax that isn't going anywhere, and it ignores the number of people that are actually leaving this borough, and as you say, the impact that's going to have on the overall economy. I'll talk about a question. I'll just talk about rates, which Jem referred to, and it's not it's not explained in the notes, but I understand that 63 million That's a huge number, which is what we've been collecting, is going down to net zero next year. And the impact that that has, I mean, I'm getting so many people now with a recent rates increase coming on the back of national insurance, saying what support can the council give us? You know, our businesses are really suffering. And I got an email from our MP, Joe Powell, today, talking about a retail shop on Portobello Road, who is really suffering and what we can do. I mean, somewhat cheap to us what we can do. And we're talking, and he was suggesting maybe we could look at tables and chairs and giving him, etc., etc. But at the bottom it said, he did raise the question of business rates. He said, but of course, I wrote it down here, I'm involved with ongoing discussions with the Treasury. So I suppose my question is that this 63 million that we used to collect, what is the suggestion as far as the government about responsibility to collecting it less year if we're not getting any benefit? Is it suggested that we go out and we collect the 63 million and we fund issues in terms of health and safety or licensing, all the services that we provide to businesses, but with no revenue to fund it?
Well, first of all, is it 63 million? How much we collect in business?
Yeah. Well, how much we retain?
It retain,
Retain,
not
sorry.
collect. So
We collect-
so what do we get in business rates?
I think
Retain.
it's 360
So,
million.
okay, so let's just be clear here, 360 million pounds, of which we will retain zero.
6.6 million we will retain.
6.6 million.
27.
Wow.
So it's going down.
Oh, 10%. It's sort of to Kim's point, because an idea pops in. Often, Mike, we get asked by businesses to give them rate reduction relief. And up to this point, I've always had to say no, because we've needed to manage our budget. But given we now won't derive any benefit from keeping the business rates, I would say, I think they should probably apply and we should grant it, because it's not coming to us anymore. It's going to the government. Is that correct?
Well, there will be obviously there will be a small impact for every relief that we get. They may set up the mechanism so that we, when we give that relief, we lose a fair portion even of that 6.6 million. So I think that may be difficult, and also we would obviously only be able to do it within the powers that we have. Just give relief because we weren't retaining the money. I mean, I think it is a very good point that we are going to be and all the councils most affected have made this point that, you know, there is very little incentive for us to make a massive effort in collecting business rates for another agency, and the same will obviously apply for the mansion tax. That is the first time it's going to be the first time that councils are collecting income that they don't get any benefit from.
So we have to collect the mansion tax, but we don't get any benefit.
That's the expectation, that we will be asked to collect it, but it will then be 100%
Tax collection
responsibility.
agency for central government.
Well, plus the cost of litigation potentially as well. I think some pen for that.
So we will get some grant for the collection of that tax.
So it's not ring fence.
My colleagues have said it all. I mean, it's just such a shocking position to be in. And the thing that we've all acknowledged is that it is everybody, and it's the most vulnerable and the poorest people in this borough.
That's the next paper.
Yeah, exactly, the next paper. But they're really going to suffer with all these increases and the decrease in services, like, for example, the schools budget that we're discussing this week in Schools Forum. There hasn't been an inflation increase for all the grants that we're getting to schools. This will have a real impact on them because they're having to pay more for their special needs, and so all around everywhere this will reverberate in our community, and that's just so distressing for all of us who work so hard to support people. But on the business improvement districts, and to your point, Kim, you just been made very well. I was talking to them today, and I said, well, you know, I think businesses should really go back to government and say, well, what are you giving back to us? You've increased our business rates. You're taking all the business rates back. Where are you sending them? You know, and yet London is earning you all the money. So I think, you know, there's a real campaign that we need to say, we do. We're the golden goose. We bring the money in, but all the money is being drained from London. And, you know, it's just, I know we all feel the same frustration and complete
Going to the Chagos side.
Yes, okay. I'll stop.
And this is linked to the business rates as well, but I noticed on page 25, there's a reduction in the weighting of the formula of the impact on the borough's daytime visitors. And at my waterfront in Handstown, I think, you know, I know for example, Harrods contributes a huge amount to business rates. I think all our wonderful businesses contribute so much to our borough and contribute so much to the country. But also we do know there is a bit of a knock-on effect for borough. We have to have more cleaning, we have to have more, maybe more wardens, and yet we have no mechanism now to pay for this. And all our visitors visiting our wonderful museums in the South Ken Quarter. So what is the weighting of this formula, and are we going to have any kind of pushback on that aspect of these?
Well, we're commenting adversely on it and saying that there isn't sufficient weighting in the needs formula for the impact of daytime visitors, so that again is a decision that they've made.
So that's made.
It's
Set in stone. That's unbelievable.
The settlement's made now.
I mean, and you're right. Obviously, daytime visitors, and that's the point we make. Daytime visitors do create costs, and we have to spend costs on street cleaning or whatever because of daytime visitors. So there should be a way to that, and there are other councils who presumably won't have any daytime visitors. But most of London obviously does have a much bigger daytime population.
Okay, Mary?
Really just to say that the whole sort of dreadful budgetary situation underlines the importance of the transformation work that's going on in the council, and that the OSC has been involved in, and we're very grateful to officers for all the work that they put into that. And also another thing that has come up in the OSC again is just the acknowledgement that there are some things we are just literally going to have to stop doing, and the sooner we start thinking about what these things are, the better.
Okay, one of the things which we haven't discussed, but if you look in the recommendations, you're going to be asked to agree. It's the recommendation of the London Council's Leaders Committee that the overall expenditure for London Borough's grants scheme is 6.73 million, and it's shared across London by the relevant constituent councils, and that our contribution to the London Borough grant scheme is £106,906. And then thirdly, to note the impact of additional local government finance settlement. I think we talked a lot about the first two, but not much about the first two. So when I ask you to agree the recommendations, can you, in your mind, really make sure that you're agreeing to all three, please? Do we agree to the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, and then the next report is the proposed changes to the council tax support scheme. Jim.
Well, this is, I mean, a horrible thing that we're having to consider. The reality of not having £108 million is that we have to find the money, and the proposals here are three different options. And realistically, we have always been one of the most generous boroughs across London and in fact across the country in giving council tax support. People maybe listening in, this essentially means people receive 100% rebate on their, or discount on their council tax, meaning they don't pay anything at all. We as Conservatives always believe that people's money is best placed in their pocket. But equally, we do understand that people all now have to contribute to this challenge, and being able to make even a small contribution will not only help us, but it will help their neighbours and everybody around them to continue to receive some of the world-class services that this council is able to deliver. So there are a few options in the paper. I don't know if you want to run through. Well, the recommendation is that we move to a reduction of 90%, which would be a 10% contribution from those that are currently not paying, which would mean £141,000 potential income to the council.
Okay, comments? Kim.
Yes, I said one. So looking at statistics, I thought it was quite interesting. It says that 77% of those who are currently receiving this are obviously against having reduction. So that begs the question about the 23% that are quite happy with it. So my question is there a question of targeting here? Because it maybe suggests that 23% are saying that they, are quite happy to give it up. So I don't know from the data.
Good question.
I'm not really sure of that. I mean, that's the figure that came out of the consultation. I mean, there will be people who accept that everybody should make a contribution. And as Councillor Marley said, this is a more generous scheme than most councils have. And one of the reasons other councils have less generous schemes, I mean, is a belief that everybody should contribute something.
Yeah.
So there is a view that that's a positive thing, irrespective of the financial cost obviously being higher if you have 100% support.
Josh?
Thank you, Mike. One of the questions I wanted to flag, of course, many people and the respondents understandably feel very upset and frustrated by it, but a lot of that highlighted was regarding if we're going to make changes to the scheme, then there needs to be a second home installment tax, which was discussed in the previous paper.
Yeah.
When we do the communications regarding this, if we make this decision tonight, will we make sure that these residents who feel very passionately about that, perhaps, maybe they will contribute if they feel that there is other contributions from elsewhere, even though I think no one will pay tax if you own a home or on the council tax reduction scheme. Will we be making that clear to these residents, say that this has been made a decision when it goes to full council, will also charge a second home council tax to make sure that some of the sting's taken out of their tail, especially the most vulnerable people who need the most. Yes.
So everyone will contribute.
So everyone contributes, not just a particular group or sector.
Yeah, no, I think it's important that we highlight. Really, I suppose, as I said earlier, that there is impact across residents on the lowest income residents and the highest income, and also in terms of all the services, so the 20 plus million, 22 million, as I was saying, is that we've added as well. So I think we have to highlight the way we've had to balance the budget because of the issues in the last raised in the last paper. That even this year has impacts across
So
different residents.
in the budget prepared, it is in there really that we say 400,000, which would be a 10% reduction. Is that correct?
Yeah.
10% reduction in the scheme. So rather than not paying 100%, you pay 90%.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that right?
So you pay.
Well,
paying 10%.
You pay 10%. Sorry, yes, exactly. You're paying 10% of the total.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what we're suggesting tonight.
And there may be, because of the first paper about Civica and the cyber attack, this is a complicated implementation. Do need to stress that, as it says in the paper. So
that even if we agree tonight that it should be implemented, you're saying that we should be aware that there may be issues around that.
Around implementation.
Around the implementation. So even if we decide on principle that it needs to go ahead, because we've baked £400,000 into the budget, you're just saying we may not get all that £400,000 depending on how we can get our systems up and running.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So just so everyone's aware of that.
Just want to clarify. So other councils do this. We haven't yet done this. So we are in line with other councils in doing this. We're in line with asking residents to contribute to paying for services, to being part of society. And just to clarify, that is for working aged people. So
yes.
Pensioners are not entitled to it. Pensioners will still get full council tax support if they need it.
Yeah.
So that's really good to hear that. So thank you.
Can I just answer it's universal credit, but they get universal credit on business rates or not? They won't get that. But sorry, council tax, to the extent that they're now having to pay that, they won't get that covered by universal credit.
No, that is a completely separate system.
this used to be a national benefit, which was brought to councils some years ago, and that's why there's different schemes in different councils. At one point, it was a universal council tax benefit scheme.
And obviously it should be a simple sum, but just can you clarify what will the 90% scheme cost us?
So that's in the 441,000 is the saving.
I'm just asking for the 90%.
Yeah.
For the households, from households.
No, what should the council, because we're reducing
us,
for
about
us.
400,000.
3.8 million, assuming the maths were.
No, if you look at the previous payment,
That's the cost.
it's 400,000.
That's the saving.
That's
the saving. I'm asking what's the cost?
Sorry.
People
So
charge
the
100%,
yeah,
how much should we
sorry.
spend?
What's the cost overall, Mike, that we're reducing by 10%?
Sorry, I haven't got over 4 million.
It's
Yes,
4.4 million. It's 4.4 million.
That's what I said, it should be the other night, but
Yeah.
it's just, I just wanted to
10%.
show that this is a cost that we are still.
That's the saving.
Yes, so I think
Well,
what
our
our
budget,
so
so
what you're saying
the whole-
is we spend a huge amount,
Yes.
more than £4 million on this, which we now are going to reduce slightly by 10%.
Yeah.
But the whole scheme costs more than that because we also pay the benefit at 100% to pensioners for non-working age.
So that would be quite interesting for the whole scheme.
Yeah, formation, that's how it.
Thanks,
Right,
Alex.
so 13 million for the whole scheme. I just think it's important that we actually make that clear, that it is
We're still
13 million
huge,
with these huge cuts that we've got to make, that we still are giving back on council.
The point.
Oh, right.
Sorry, this is a bit left of centre, but it's all popped into my head. Do you know how much money we use to benefits board a year? And is universal credit benefit fraud investigated by us, by central government?
I don't know how much we lose to benefit fraud. Obviously we couldn't know that because we wouldn't lose it if we knew it. So I suppose to some
But you
extent.
know how, when we are chasing
But
up,
we do.
what potentially, because we do follow up on some of these things.
So,
Yeah, so we
So we
have.
must have, I know we don't know, I know what you're saying.
Maxine, why don't you go
Yeah,
ahead?
so in terms of, we have a fraud investigation team.
that's, like, yeah.
They will investigate fraud against the council. So we do investigate housing, housing fraud, and housing benefit fraud would be included in that. As indeed would evidence of fraudulent, any fraudulent claim against the council could be investigated by them. What we don't, but Universal Credit is a matter for central government.
They do this, yeah.
So they would do the investigation for that.
Yeah, I suppose the reason I ask is there was you probably saw that they finally brought to court a universal credit fraud that was £50 million, the largest ever, group of Bulgarians. And I'm under the radar way, and I know our team do a really good job, but on the housing, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of subletting, lots of Airbnb. I mean, we know it's going on. And I just, I don't know how much they recover each year, or that they uncover, I should say. But I would, I think rather than impoverishing poor people, I'd rather be, cracking down on. We're looking for sources of income, and trying not to
I
make
think in
us.
future years, we should probably.
Yeah, I just, we should just something popped into my head.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a lot more fraud going on than we realise, because these days, electronic stuff, it's so much easier.
So, I suppose my last question, Mike, was, we know that there are a minority of London boroughs who still offer 100%, right? The really small minority. If we reduce it by 10%, so we're not giving everyone, sorry, I know I always get the 90 and the 10 sort of confused, but rather than offering a 100% reduction, we offer 90% reduction. Where would we rank in London? Do we have any idea? And, I understand places like Newham and Brent are even less generous, and residents pay a higher percentage. Is that anything that we're thinking about? So you've given us 10% and 20%, but what are Brent and Newham doing? Where do we rank in London? Where are we in the overall firmament?
Yeah, I haven't got those figures in front of me, but I think we still will be on the more generous side.
So back to Catherine's point, we'll still be spending how many millions, did you say? 13. 13. Right, okay. So Mary, have you got any comments? Otherwise, I'm going to ask the leadership team to come
I
through.
just wanted to comment, we haven't really discussed it in OSC, but 11.3 sort of talks about how we couldn't really do an equality impact assessment because of the cyber attack. But I'm sure we're going to discuss this again, and I think it'd be really helpful to have a better understanding of who we are helping via this, because what today's to me is revealed is that there are various, classes of recipient within this, and it would be really helpful to know how much good this does, as opposed to saving the money and spending it on a service.
Yeah.
And I just think we need to. It comes back to this whole thing about data and how we use it and being a bit more forensic about it. So, completely understandable in this case, we've had a cyber attack, but in future, would we be a bit more curious about what we do?
Okay, so we're asked to make some choices. I don't know if anyone is advocating for us to reduce the council tax reduction by 20%, or are we, in terms of the wrong word, are we proposing to reduce it by 10% so that we can find that 40,000 of savings to the budget? Do we agree that? And are we agree that it should be implemented this year, or do we think it should be implemented next year? As it's in the budget for this year, and I think we should do that. Okay, so does that give you a clear steer, Mike? Thank you very much. And again, it's not something that we want to do, but it's something that the government has forced upon us. Right, so is the update on the Grenfell Support Programme. Welcome, Joe. So, over to you, Sarah and Joe.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update on the delivery of the Grenfell Support Programme and the proposed changes following consultation with bereaved survivors and the immediate community. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who responded to the consultation. And I hope the proposed changes will improve their experience of the support available. And Joe will talk through the proposed changes, but in particular, I would like to highlight the impact of the leisure centre memberships and the positive feedback received in the consultation. And I really hope the NHS will recognise this positive impact this has had from improved health and wellbeing, family bonding and connection to the community. And they will consider providing funding for this in the future, because I think it really has an enormous impact. I also want to thank officers for continuing to provide support to the bereaved survivors in the immediate community following the cyber attack. This has been a really challenging time for them, but officers swiftly found workarounds and continue to deliver the programme with minimal disruption to residents. So, Joe, please pass on thanks to the team. I think they did a really good job. And over to you.
Thanks, Councillor Addenbrooke. Like you've certainly summarised the main kind of contours of the paper. We are making some small changes on the dedicated service side. So it says for survivors mainly around the opt-in, opt-out window, and that's something that we are doing in response to feedback we heard through the recent survey. The main changes you suggest are on the Grenfell Community Support Programme, where we said from the beginning that we would need to continue to evolve the support over time, and we need to listen to feedback. You'll remember that we had slightly smaller responses, more limited responses to the original consultation. So we need to kind of redouble our efforts through the first year of delivery to gather feedback about the programme and whether it was working for people. We tried to do that through a pretty extensive review in the autumn and heard from over 400 people, which was actually more than we heard from at any single stage of the previous consultation, which was really positive news. And in response to that feedback, we're making a few big changes, one of which is a commitment to extend the leisure centre memberships. It's worth saying there are negotiations that need to happen and that are ongoing at the moment with Kensington Leisure Centre about those, but I'm confident we can agree something that works for next year. The second change is an increase in the annual wellbeing grant, which we're paying to households. So we've committed here, and subject to the decision tonight, to increasing that grant to over £500. The exact amount of that will depend a little bit on the take up from year one. And one impact of the cyber attack is that we've had to hold off on that final push to encourage people to apply for the £350 this year, but we're going to extend that window so people have got a bit more time. There is also a decision tonight to work with a community group to design some of the community activities, which is an area where we know the community wants to see more progress. We've had quite a lot of feedback through the review about the sorts of activities people want to see funded through that pot, which is really positive. And I would just say that both on the Breeding Survivor side and on the community side, we've had quite a lot of feedback through the survey and the community review, which doesn't speak to the kind of large changes we're asking for approval here, but speaks to people's experience of the programme more broadly and of wider council services. So the other priority is to kind of really use that feedback to maximum effect in the coming months.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for the report. I get information through my letterbox about this. Just about, I'm curious about the wellbeing grant. So 291 respondents have had the grant, but out of how many households is that? Because within 500 metres of the tower, so that's a huge number of households.
Yes. So that 290 respondents was just obviously the people who responded to the survey who had accessed the wellbeing grant. There are about 5,500 households in that 500 metre area. The latest, I think, as of this week, we're at about 2,200 wellbeing grants payments. So roughly kind of half, a bit less than half of those. We haven't had that opportunity to do the final push, but I think what we will try to establish in the next couple of months before the cut-off date is what our likely ceiling for that is, because I think we knew from the beginning that there are affluent households in that area who might choose not to apply for the grant. What we're trying to do is overcome any barriers people we haven't yet communicated with. So we've done quite a lot of work in some of the sheltered blocks to make sure people are aware that they can access. And we're trying to make the process as easy as possible for people in year 2 so that it's an automatic payment so that we can focus on people who haven't yet claimed. So one thing we haven't really been able to establish is what that, is what really sort of success looks like. And it's taken this first year to test. We've tried quite a lot of different channels of communications, but I'm hopeful we can reach at least, I'm hopeful we can reach 3,000 households.
So just to follow up on that, so you mentioned affluent households, so you would not be expecting the affluent households to apply for this wellbeing grant, but are they within their right to apply?
Of course, they're perfectly entitled to, but I think some people make the choice not to do that, and that's certainly the feedback that we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second thing is, if you are increasing these wellbeing grants to over £500, at what point will then you have to stop it? Because then you get up to 5,000 households. How many years then will it then?
Yeah, so we're working through the assumptions at the moment, but the increase to over £500, I'm very clear that we shouldn't be doing that unless we are confident, which we are at £500. The question is how far above that we can go, that we can pay households for the full 3 years without reducing the rate of the grant. So I think we can make some safe assumptions that don't assume that every single one of those 5,500 households, but nonetheless assume that a reasonable number apply each year.
Yeah, you've set out the key statistics, Joe, on 105. And obviously, I think it's really good. You've got very positive response on all the 3 ones. But there is a consistent, albeit small, dissatisfaction. The system is on delay. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that, if there's a reason and something we can might address.
Yes, so there were 2 things really. On the wellbeing grants payment, it was the shift from IBC to Oracle, which meant we had to pause those payments. We did make as many payments as we possibly could before that shift, but that shift meant that some people did then experience quite a long delay in getting their wellbeing grant. We had that resolved pretty much by the end of May. So from the beginning of June, people were being paid on a regular cycle and there wasn't a delay. But I think some of that feedback reflects those early problems. On the leisure centre memberships, there were some teething problems with the kind of interface with the leisure centre itself, which I think, again, we've mostly resolved. Good. But I think we need to do a little bit more work, especially given that as I say, most of this will be automatic for those who have already claimed this support, to make sure that anybody making a new application who hasn't applied before has as seamless an experience as possible.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate you on the Education Hub. And actually, there's a huge engagement you've already had with it. I was so impressed when I went to the launch that the
the team that your team employed to be running that, and they were just really fantastic and wonderful. So that's just such an exciting thing that it's up and running. It's great, but obviously it's disappointing. I can understand you couldn't do the bursaries because of the cyber attack, which is frustrating for everyone. But have you got some idea of the number of sort of people applying for bursaries? I mean, do you think there's been a big uptake in that, or you're expecting a big uptake?
Yes, so we've launched the children and young people bursaries, and actually I think the first panel meetings, I think people should be hearing decisions from that in the next week or so. I think I'm right in saying, and perhaps don't quote me on these figures, that we had about 50 applications for the third round, and we were able to approve some of those through the panel process, but that will be a kind of rolling application process, so we'll be able to apply, I think, each month.
Fantastic, that's great, thank you.
Anything else, Mary?
We had a long discussion, as Joe will remember, about this paper, and just a few sort of highlights. We got assurance, for example, that the residents of Grenfell Wharf will be able to influence the programme. That was of concern to members of the committee. Very much welcomed the education hub. That was a big theme. And then going back to data again, I think there was a desire or suggestion that some of the tracking of the uptake and use of the pre-gym membership could be enhanced, so we could really dig down into the benefit that it was giving. But otherwise, generally very positive reception of this paper.
And I think we should make clear that, you know, given all our discussions earlier about fair funding and the budget, but this is all funded from the global settlement, isn't it? So this programme will run till 2028 because the envelope has already been previously agreed. I just think you should make that clear. Because, you know, the rest of this meeting we've been talking about cuts, and this is an area which we are not going to cut because we have already promised these.
And just to add to that, I think that the priorities are to obviously ensure that this funding is spent well and in accordance with the plans, and we have the additional scrutiny both from the OSC and from the independent scrutiny function, but also to make sure that we're gathering some of the lessons and the feedback and the ways of working through this programme to share with the wider council and to use to inform our kind of broader transformation journey, which has been referenced.
And the independent scrutineers are so far content with?
Yes, so they've produced 2 reports now on the first 2 quarters of reporting, and they're expecting to produce a third in the coming months. They are broadly satisfied. They've made some recommendations, which I know we went into some detail with in the scrutiny paper, but we are working on implementing those.
Thank you very much. So can we all agree that the recommendations in paragraph 2, the changes and the progress?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, the next is a contract award for 6 older people's Parsons Day Opportunity Services.
Sharon? Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, brought this paper to leadership today so we can look at a contract award. It's for a large amount, for about £10 million. And there is a consortium effectively of services that we are going to provide our older residents in the borough. As you can see from the report, these vary from places like Open Age, Octavia, etc. And then there's a further explanation of what they are on page 136 that goes into detail for these particular issues. Now, of course, you know, I'm conscious that the council is under great financial pressure. We've also had cuts to adult social care budgets in the NHS as well, especially regarding the BCF. So I'm very conscious of the pressure that everyone is under as well. And I think Gareth, who we're here tonight, has done a great job in doing the best we can regarding procurement for these relations to particular prices, because they're big prices. Big commission services. But happy to take questions on what we're offering and anything along that. But at the base of it, though, we do have to do this under the Care Act. It's a statutory responsibility for us to apply some of these services to our residents. And hope they will get the best services for the best money that we can available.
Can I just say,
Yes.
I should have said right at the beginning, before even introducing you, there is a part B to this. It's an uplift contingency in the part B appendix. Just so that our clerk knows that we have discussed this before we came into the meeting. So we won't go into private session because we have already discussed this. Thank you. Okay, any other? Start with Jen. Some questions.
It's a question that only popped into my mind because the information was put there, but we've got company numbers for Age UK and then we have registration number for Octavia Housing. OpenAge is a charity, and I was just wondering, with VAT and the fact that they are registered companies rather than charities, they will obviously then potentially at the end of the year be paying tax, profit tax on that one. Is that ordinary that Age UK is not a charity? And does it make any difference to the amount that they actually receive at the end of the year?
Age UK or OpenAge generally?
Well, Age UK is the registered regulated company, whereas OpenAge is a charity.
Your question is,
So my question is, given one is a charity that's able to offset the huge amount of their costs through the work that they do, whereas Age UK here is registered as a regular company, they will have to, if they were to make a profit at the end of the year, would have to give a chunk of that to the government.
that'll be one of those organisations that's dual registered as both a charity and a company, so that'll be lots of money.
And then, so my question really is, why aren't we engaging the charitable side of them rather than the profitable side?
Check the answer to that.
Good question. Are there any questions on this? I know we've discussed it a lot previously, and again, to the point that we said before, although we have found 21 million pounds of savings, this is good news, isn't it? It's something that we do need to do given this.
I mean, if I could, Josh,
Yeah.
said this in the introduction, and I'm so proud that we're maintaining investment in services.
Yes.
Mostly because of what it does in terms of preventing the need for more intrusive care, either through home care or additions to care homes. But in addition to that, that investment in prevention generally represents value for money. And so the more that we're able to continue doing this, we know that we're down the line and spending less on more expensive care. So it's better for the individuals and better for the taxpayer. And just one other point I was going to mention here is in relation to the length of contract. Because I know we've had some discussions about this in relation to the social care and other contracts in the past. So we're asking for 5 years plus two optional extensions here. And that's something that we're seeing increasingly in other boroughs and other councils around the country. As a way to provide some stability in what is a very fragile market in social care. So it allows the providers to invest in and think about properties, but crucially to invest in retention staff, which also makes a big difference in terms of the quality of provision for the coming along to those services. And of course, through our kind of contracting terms, we can make changes to that. But giving that certainty up front is actually kind of really helpful.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to point out it is about value for money, and it's a happy state where it can help individuals, and it saves us huge amounts of money further on if we can keep people out of care, which is what they want to. So we all gain. Emma,
Can I just say something? And I completely agree with Elizabeth that, we add to the sum of human happiness and we hopefully save money. And I think we all know that that's the case. But as budgets get tighter, I think an exercise where you can perhaps demonstrate that a bit more empirically might be helpful. Because we know intuitively, but Mary may have seen something in her, but actually something that shows, and this is what happens when we go to hospital, what we have to do after I think that might be a useful exercise for you as times get tougher, just to be able to say, we know actually we're saving money by doing this. Thank you.
Mary?
I'd just really like to follow up what Emma said. We've talked about this before, about the fact that, when we're going to have to start making deep cuts, not making them where it's actually going to cost us more in the long run. And in order to be certain that we're doing that, we need services to think always about when they express these things to us, talking about the sort of social cost or the potentially unidentified or unintentional consequences. In some cases, maybe.
Thank you. Okay. Is everyone happy to read the recommendations in paragraph 2?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And I don't believe there's any other business. So thank you very much for coming on a very wet, miserable night. And the meeting is now. I'm sure.
Josh, you won't explain to me.
Right.
Well, yes, they've gone.
Very good.